Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I am Leo Flowers. How are you? Yeah, you. I don't know why my voice has to get high when I'm asking, how are you? How are you sleeping? How'd you sleep last night, huh? Or maybe you're up in the middle of the night listening to this podcast, whichever it is. I'm glad you joined me. I'm glad you're here right now and listening and tuning in. I hope this podcast episode finds you in good health. We have a great and wonderful episode for you. This was fun, and you're going to get a lot of value out of this. We in 1 hour. You've heard me talk about nutrient dense episodes, and that's what this podcast is. This podcast is a sweet potato with quinoa and kale and like grass fed beef right there. We have Lawrence Jackson, who is a PhD assistant professor at UNLV and has a private practice out there in Vegas where he helps people of all types of diverse backgrounds who are struggling with depression, anxiety, familial conflict, non traditional relationships, sexual issues, and other life transitions. Uh, he has a monthly event called Black Therapy Fridays that helps change the narrative related to therapy for people of color and helping others recognize the benefits of therapy. Today, we get into so much. Y'all not, you're going to have to put a seatbelt on for this one. Uh, Today, we talk about personal growth. Yeah, because for those out there who are so outcome oriented, you want to get that A. If you have kids who are focused on getting an A, or if you're that person that's achievement oriented, and you don't know how to take a second to step back, and that stress and that overwhelm is getting to you. We talk about how to handle. You can still be a perfectionist. You can still be achievement oriented, but what you need to do in addition to being achievement oriented. We also talk about how to handle transitions. A lot of people are transitioning right now. How do you handle transitions? And how do you handle cultural pressures, right? We have a lot of cultural pressures and expectations that are put upon us. And sometimes we're putting those on the people around us and we're not even aware. And I mean, what he discusses, I repeat like 10 times just so you guys get what he's saying and so that I get what he's saying also. And then we also talk about the moment that brought him to tears. That's right. The moment that made him cry. He broke down. Not during the episode, but a moment in his life that brought him. And then we get into relationship talk. Oh, yeah. I know you like to hear about relationships, don't you? We all do, right? And we differentiate the difference between cheating, entanglements, infidelity, and boundary violations. Oh, yeah. Do you know what a boundary violation is? Nah, you've never discussed boundary violations. And that leads us into our conversation about the code of conduct for your relationship and the importance of creating that. And even if you're not in a relationship, creating a code of conduct for yourself or for your future relationships. And then for those of us who are feeling overwhelmed, oh yeah, I've been overwhelmed these past couple of days. Leo Flowers been eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That's how you know I'm overwhelmed. You may have heard my girlfriend giggling in the background just now. When Leo Flowers is reaching for the PB and J's, oh yeah, and then I had some ice cream with it. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sharing all the things. I'm not going to hold back at all. And then we also, I feel like I haven't progressed at all as a male. We talk about performance anxiety in women. It's always talked about for men, but today we talk about performance anxiety for women. And then what does it mean when women say they're not in the mood? Oh, yeah. So we get into some intimacy talk. We even get into some autoeroticism talk and the importance of understanding your body, right? And we get into so much more. But that's all in an hour, ladies and gentlemen. That's all in an hour. So sit back, relax, enjoy the episode. I hope this finds you in good health. Hope you're sleeping well. Hope your bowel movements are smooth and quick. You're in and out of there. Wash your hands and go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Now, you don't have to wash your hands to go to thrivewithleo.com. You can go to thrivewithleo.com with dirty, filthy hands. You could go to thrivewithleo.com with the COVID hands, okay? But go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. And let's get to tomorrow together. With that said, let's jump into the episode. Where are you located right now?
I am in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Oh, Yeezy. Oh man, you're not stepping outside at all. It's like
Nope.
10,000 degrees.
No parts. None at all.
But you're out there in Las Vegas because you're an assistant professor at UNLV, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so
yes.
what are you teaching at UNLV?
And so I am working within a couple and family therapy program. And so we have a master's in couple and family therapy that we train master level clinicians to serve the community in a lot of different capacities. And so I teach some of those core classes for them to be able to get that training and graduate. I supervise them as well. I also work with undergrads and teach different classes within our family and child sciences, our family and child minor. And some of those classes are so much fun. We got classes like personal growth, when I really just kind of work through different ways to grow and different capacities to measure and assess your levels of growth and things to overcome. Sometimes it's teaching classes like Intro to Couple and Family Therapy, which is learning about the different models and how we view things and how we serve communities based on kind of our thought processes and the theoretical backgrounds that we may use as well. So it's a lot of fun. Really enjoy it.
So basically, you teach everything. I mean, that sounds like all the things.
They put me, it's a diverse portfolio. I would like to say that it's definitely a diverse portfolio. I'll get a little bit of here, get a little bit of there, but it's a lot of fun overall.
You talk about teaching personal growth, and I remember we had personal growth courses in college, and I fell asleep. I picked a seat in the back of the class. I would lay down. I would like person whatever. And now that I'm 44, I'm all about that personal growth.
Yeah.
What is the message you're trying to communicate to college students? I mean, it's like the last thing they're really trying to do is grow. That's the last thing they're thinking about.
Yeah. I think the biggest message is reflection. I think an important part of growth is self-reflection, self-introspection. And this class really kind of forces them as they maneuver through to do that, right? And so one of the first things I say during the first day of class is, hey, what is your goal for this class, right? And everybody's like, oh, I want to make an A, I want to make an A, I want to make an A, or, I want to pass this class. Well, in order to do that, there's going to be some self-reflection, self-introspection that's going to take place within this class, right? And so we kind of funnel things in a way that forces them to some capacity, right, to do some introspection on themselves, figure out some things that they can improve on, whether it be like, hey, I want you to sit in silence for 5 minutes and just see what comes to your brain and write it down, right? Or something like, okay, now I want you to meditate, see what the difference was, right? See what has changed during that 5 minutes in this particular capacity compared to the other. And so I think in a lot of ways, it's just a lot of self-reflection, because I believe that helps them to learn more about themselves. And when you learn more about yourself, you're able to pick up on things you can improve on, and maybe things that you really like about yourself, do you want to keep on maintaining?
What I love about the personal growth aspect and emphasizing reflection is that, and I've mentioned this in other podcasts, my girlfriend is right now she's training to work for the suicide prevention hotlines. And the two most prevalent calls that they're receiving at this time, and when I say this time, it's we're in July, and I'm saying this because I don't know when this is going to air, but are regarding grades and regarding breakups. And so for you to mention, kids always saying that they want to get an A, or they want to get the best grade, or they want to graduate summa cum laude, and putting all this pressure on themselves and thinking they
Yeah.
have to go because they see everybody else, or at least it looks like everybody else is going and achieving and getting straight A's and working two jobs and volunteering and starting creating a startup. It feels like
Yeah.
everybody's doing all the things. So for you to emphasize reflection, so that these students who feel all this pressure know that it's about the process, and it's about making sure that the direction that you're headed is aligned with your values and not someone else's expectations. Because I'm sure you find that also is that this pressure to get an A, to achieve, is usually not primarily theirs. It's coming from some outside factor, whether it's their parents or a message from society.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm thinking back even to part of my undergrad experience and like, hey, I'm doing this because it's what my parents want, right? And then figuring out along the way that that's not what I want. And even that was a big transition, like saying like outwardly, this is not what I want to do. I want to do something else. Right. And there's a life transition that comes with that because in some ways you're kind of living under that mold, right? That you've been conditioned to socialize around. And now you're doing something different. And now you're starting to view things in a different light. And it takes that's a growth process, right? And that definitely takes a lot of time. But it's definitely a life transition that causes some of the stress, right? Causes some of these like, am I in control? What am I in control of? What am I not in control of? And the pressure and stress that comes along with that as well.
Man, there's two things I want to unpack. One, I want to put a pin in that whole idea of transition and sitting down and taking time to figure out what am I in control of and what am I not in control of. But I want to go back and talk about when someone sits down or reflect, right? And to gain self-awareness, and then they realize that the path that they're on is not aligned with their values, or it's another voice that's been guiding them. What's their next step? After they sit down and reflect, like, oh, this is not what I really want to do. Where do they go from there?
Yeah. And so my biggest motto, I have it like on everything, my business cards, even in personal growth, any other my other classes, I make sure that students leave knowing this saying, right? And it's awareness brings the opportunity for change, right? You can't change things that you're not aware of. And that's what takes place in the self-reflection stage, right? But awareness itself doesn't bring change about, right? You can be aware of something, right, and not make any changes about it. You can be aware it's cold and not put no clothes on, right? And so what I try to also share with them is that while awareness brings the opportunity for change, intentionality brings change about. You can't change things out. Be intentional and purposeful about making certain changes in your life, right? And so once they are able to realize these things, the hardest part is the intentionality piece, right? That's the action piece. That's that next bigger step. And while it's one thing being aware of it, it's another thing making those moves. And so what we try to do is try to help them figure out the pros and cons of each, right? If you stay on this path and you know it's not what you want to do, are you gonna have a fulfilling life? Are you going to enjoy your relationships? Are you going to be able to continue to improve in these different capacities? Or if you were to make this change, will it be initially hard, but overall be a better fit for you, right? And so, like, sometimes I like to say that, temporary inconvenience is a bridge to long-term benefits, right? And so sometimes temporarily being kind of inconvenienced at the time may be something that's beneficial for you long-term, right? Maybe it's just part of the process, but not the end goal. And so being able to recognize that and be able just to work through that and help students work through that and find other mechanisms to help them work through that is extremely important. I think it's a really big part of that class, which I really, really enjoy.
I love that part. It's first you're aware, and then we do have to take action. Do we put the coat on? Do we not put it on? For a lot of students and even a lot of adults, part of that pressure is a cultural expectation.
Yeah,
I have friends who are my one of my friends was telling me about her friend who is Indian, and
yeah,
and the expectations that are not just placed on her from her family, but from the culture, the expectations of the culture. How do you help what does a student say to their family, to their culture, to say, hey, I know the expectation is A, but I got to go B. How do they have that
yeah.
conversation? What do they say?
Yeah. I think it's definitely tailored to every approach, right? But I think it's being able to discover some of these secondary or the primary emotions instead of secondary, right? And so maybe some of the reasons behind some of these um, expectations is a bigger message. I want my kids to be better than me. I want them to be successful, right? And being able to utilize that as a starting point for that conversation. So being able to help them identify some of the primary emotions, the primary implications of kind of these expectations from their parents, and helping them be able to work through it that way. And so, like, hey, mom and dad, I know you really wanted me to be successful. I know you want me to be, better than you are in these different capacities, and I really appreciate the care and love that you shared for me, right? And I really feel like this can also be accomplished in these different ways, right? And so being able to utilize kind of what's really at the core of these things, right? And I think back even for me, like, my parents, being in their 70s and being African American, and their thoughts was, I want my son to be a doctor because that holds a lot of power, right? And for them, because they were not able to make it in this capacity for them, right? They thought that's what I want for my kids. I want them to be better, and this is a way that it can look better, right? And so when I had that conversation, I had to let them know, like, hey, like, I know what you're trying to do. I know what the message that you're sending, and I think you're doing a great job of that. And this is another way I can do that, and it just may look differently than what you're expecting. So it's not that the outcome would be different. It's just my mechanism, way of going about it would be different, and it's something that better fits me.
Man, I love that. I want to hone that. I want to drive that into people who are listening into their head. This is another way I can do that. I'm gonna say it again. This is another way I can do that. Man, I love that coming from you, Lawrence. Can I call you Lawrence? Larry, what do they call you out there on the
Sure,
streets? LJ? What
sure.
is it? Um,
Whole bunch of Lawrence, LJ, L, all the things. So
all
it's
the
all good.
things. And the fact that it sounds like what you're saying is, if you're an adult or a kid and you're feeling parental pressures or expectations, is to one, address their concerns. Is to say, hey, I understand you're thinking about my safety, you're thinking about my health, and you're thinking about my future. I understand that, and I understand that you think that if I become a doctor and get straight A's, that gives me X, Y, and Z. Whether, like for you, you gave the example of being a doctor gives you power, right? And so and that's the root of it, is that they want you to have power. They don't want you to feel powerless
Yeah,
because, maybe for your parents, they experienced a feeling of powerlessness, and they're like, the last thing I want my kid to feel is that way. So what you'll find is that your parents are, there's an emotion or a value that they are that they want you to have, and that they also want you to avoid it, right? And once you get to that, then you can say, here's some other ways I can achieve that. So we both get what we want. You want me to have power. I want to have power. Nobody doesn't want to walk the earth without power, but there's
yeah,
so many ways to get the juice, right?
absolutely. Yeah, that cool
Uh,
finale. There's so many ways to get to the finish line.
Absolutely. And now to go back, because we're talking about transitions earlier,
Yeah,
and I love that, because I'm always talking about, when I life coaching and people come to me, the three T's for me have always been traumas, transitions, and tragedies, right? Like it's
yeah,
people fall into issues fall into one of those three categories, as far as how I look at it. And transitions are so challenging for a lot of people. Can you talk to us about how to handle that? You talked about what you can control and what you can't control.
yeah, yeah. And so we always experience life transitions, and I say always because in every capacity, everything we do, there's going to be a time in our life when something's going to change. It's a transition, right? The difference is that we maybe have the access to resources, we maybe have the support necessary that makes that feeling, the adaptation to some of those transitions easy. But that's not always the case, right? And so, like, I'm thinking about even what's happening in society right now, COVID. The reason why things are impacting us at different capacities because we now have a stressor above and beyond any other stressors. We might not have the access to the same amount of resources to be able to adapt through it. So we may have maladaptation, right? We may be able to adapt at a consistent level, or maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, right? And we may have something else that might come right after that, right? That could be that much more challenging to navigate through. And so when I think about life transitions, and even going back to kind of the what you can control, what you can't control, I think it's important to recognize that there's things that occur that we can't control. And I think what becomes challenging is that when we as human beings try to control things we can't. Because once we realize we can't control them, it's not like we're like, all right, cool, can't control this, I'm out. We're like, no, I'm going to find a way to control this. I'm going to make it happen. So we put more energy, put more stress, right? And we raise that anxiety level even higher, trying to control something we can't. In actuality, it does nothing but causes us to be at a higher level of anxiousness, a higher level of stress, and experience these things all at once. And so I had to really work with people to recognize that we may be not control certain situations, but we control our relationship with those situations. We control how we react to these situations, right? And so we may not be able to control our best friend being upset with us, but we may be able to control how we interact with that best friend and how we feel about that. May not be able to control that we don't have, certain research for X, Y, and Z, but we maybe be able to control how we feel, our mood, our emotions, right? How we choose to navigate that day, right? And so really trying to figure out what are these things in these moments, right, that feel like this really compounding that stressor onto us, right, that we can't control, and focusing on that. I have conversations with my clients all the time about focusing on finding ways, right, to control the things you can within the constraints, right? And so if we're dealing with the kind of environmental constraints, cool, what we can do within that environment that can make us happy? What can we do within that environment that we can't control? Be able to really work on those things instead of focusing on those things we can't control, because it's going to do nothing but continually raise our anxiety, continue to raise our stress. And no matter how much we do that, it's not going to cause us to gain more control of these things. And so I really look at the locus of control of these things, being able to control what you can, right? And let go of the things that you can't. And it's hard to let go, right? It's hard to be like, all right, cool, I'm going to let this go. Everything's all right, right? I kind of look at anxiousness is the worry of the future, right? A worry of the things we can't control. But really being able to focus on the present and what you can, and be able to hone in on that and do the best you can within those moments.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that because you talk about letting go, and at this time, because we're talking about not just the COVID-19, but the
Yeah.
protests and Black Lives Matter movement, and we have this kind of cancel culture, and what I'm finding is that people are cutting people out of their lives because they're looking for allies, and it's like they're creating this either you're with me or against me. Are there issues with having that type of mindset of this with me or against me type of mindset?
Yeah, I think in a way that creates absolutes, right? And like if I look at to like our modern ideas and modern culture, it was made in absolutes. Like there's an absolute right way to do this, absolute wrong way to do these things. And we know kind of from our postmodernist perspective, that's not the case, right? There's some grays. You can be with me in some areas and you can't be in other areas. Doesn't mean that because the ones you're not, I'm all of a sudden can't, interact with you. And so I think in some ways it cancels out the opportunity for growth, right? Because in some ways, some of those gray areas allow space to be able to grow, to learn more, to be more inclusive, whatever case may be, that can really help individuals. If we just cancel them out automatically and write them off, right? We don't get an opportunity to have that growth spurt, to experience what that looks like, right? And change is uncomfortable, right? And so sometimes it takes that gray in order to push them through, or us through, for us to be able to experience certain things, right? And so I think by having some of those in some situations, having that kind of that mindset of like, oh, whatever, it's with me or you're not, it's all or nothing. It doesn't allow space for people to be more inclusive, to learn more, to be able to do more, right? You could say you're not quite there, and I'm gonna see what I can do to help you, right? But saying, oh no, I can't just at all, right? I think that makes it challenging, because in some way, in form or fashion, if they're ever going to make those changes, somebody's got to be able to support them. And it could be somebody, it could be something, it could be a podcast as great as this one. It could be other opportunities, something that's there that at the right time came about and supported them and helped them see something different, right? and I personally, being in this field, I want to help people reach these different milestones, right? And so that's why I think it's extremely important for me to keep open mind and to pick up where people are at, but also realize that, like, okay, we got some work to do. How can I help you to make this work? How can I help you to get to this space so we can do the things that we really want to do together?
Can you give us an example of that of helping someone get to that space? For
Yeah,
example, let's take something related to the racial climate in
yeah,
terms of either you're protesting and posting
yeah,
or you're against me. And but then also in relationships, I think that a lot of times in relationships, we create this all or nothing dichotomy
yeah,
and forcing people into a corner.
yeah. So the one I thought of just immediately when you said both of those things. Um, and so being on Facebook, right? And a little bit about me, I'm from Dallas, Texas. And so I grew up in the South. Um, and I have had experience with peers or people that I know that disagreed with the value of my life, right? And I take it that way because, when they're saying things, I don't think they recognize the impact, right? Because they may have good intentions, whatever it may be, but it doesn't recognize the impact of some of the statements they're saying, the stance they may have. And so I had one colleague or friend that I had in middle school and high school, and we were going back and forth about Black Lives Matter. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. Um, Maybe around 3 years ago, there was a big protest in Dallas. Unfortunately, some police officers got killed as well, and we were going back and forth, right? Just like, man, I can't believe these individuals, like they don't care. Black Lives Matter doesn't care about anybody. I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, do you not understand what is happening, right? And like I used to go back and forth. I used to feel so triggered by his post, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't erase him because I always wanted to know what other people, how they view me and view my life, right? I always wanted to know. I never wanted to lose sight of what I'm doing, what I'm passionate about, because those are the reasons why, right? And so I made sure that anytime he would say things or things would come about, I made sure to add a little tidbit, add a little research, add a little stats, add a little bit more clarity from a different perspective, just to continue to challenge him, right? Because in my mind, I'd be damned if this is the only narrative that's out there. If anybody that's connected with this person, they're going to see a different side, whether they want to believe it or not. They're going to see a different side, right? And recently, we just had a conversation about a month and a half ago, and he messaged me on Facebook, and he was like, "Yo, I apologize. I didn't see it then, but I definitely see it now." Um, when I was talking about power and privilege and all these different things, I think his natural response is to shut off. And I could have just said, you know what, forget it, I'm back. But I still try to educate. I still try to inform. I still try to share a different perspective. And because of that experience, he came back to me later on, was like, yo, like, it took me a couple of years to get there. I think it had a lot to do with what I was seeing, right? And wanting, again, to change some of those narratives of what he was seeing for me to see a different perspective. And once I did my own research, I realized that, like, yo, Black lives do matter, right? And unfortunately, people do not recognize that above and beyond what they're experiencing for their own selves, because they fail to recognize the disparities, the inequalities that are present to a certain racial group that they don't have to experience themselves, right? And it was, honestly, brought me to tears, right? Because this is somebody that I've been combating with for so long, right? In a lot of ways, like my heart used to like start to beat when or to beat faster when he used to post things. I'm just like, oh, what's next? What's today, right? Um, but because of those conversations, it helped plant a seed that was later maybe fostered and growing through his own research that allowed him to see a different perspective. Where now he's having conversations with even his peers, people that I can't reach, to let them know they're like, hey, like, I get your perspective, but let's look at this one too, right? And hopefully when they see that too, they realize that, like, this is actually a lot of people's experience, and this is just as real as yours, if not even realer, right? And so being able to navigate through those spaces with him allowed him to see something different, which now created somebody who can reach a different community or a different population that I can't reach, sharing this exact same message that I really care about as well. When I think about it for relationships, I think. Go ahead.
LJ, can I say something real quick to that?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because for the listeners and just for myself is that even though we are talking about we're talking about specifically Black Lives Matter, what we're also talking about is how to be of influence to the people in your life. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be about Black Lives Matter. It doesn't have to be about race. It could be about money. It could be
Yeah.
about sex. It could be about travel. It could be about anything where you are trying to negotiate or have some measure of influence, or you're in a dispute with a friend, somebody who you've known for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, or a family member, and you just keep butting heads. And what I want you to take away from this is that he said he just slowly kept educating him, dropping little nuggets. He didn't cancel him. He didn't block him. He maintained that relationship because, as he said, the growth, because and correct me if I'm wrong, LJ,
Yeah.
because of that pushback, because of that resistance, because of the challenge, it encouraged you to learn more. It
Yeah.
encouraged you to dig deeper. I had a conversation with a friend at lunch a couple weeks back, and it brought me to tears. That I was like, I can't believe this is coming out of your mouth. But what I did was I read more, I studied more, I suited up, I armor. I was like Batman who
Yeah.
lost to defeat, and I was like, I got to go back and train. I got to study the ways of the ancient Sanskrit.
Yeah.
And now there's been growth, and now I feel so calm and collected, and I feel ready for battle. Was that your experience, LJ, or was there a different?
Absolutely. I think that hit a nail on the head, right? And so at the time, I was doing research on children of divorce, finding more positive ways to handle adjustment. I switched my whole research agenda. I was like, you know what? This is great, and I love doing this work, but there's other work that needs to be done, right? And I switched my research agenda to really focus on Black men education, Black boys in education, right? And because of that, I learned so much about kind of the systemic institutional racism that maybe we don't even think about, discrimination that's even present, the different ways of oppression, right? And so I started to even look at videos that unfortunately is so easily accessed and available to us about a Black man being killed, and recognizes that message that's being sent to Black boys, right? And that really changed the way I view things. It really changed the way that I saw life as a whole and my purpose. And it gave me just a renewed feeling of how can I help my community, right? How can I make a bigger difference, right? If I'm going to get this degree anyway, doing research or focusing on research, why not research something that I can really be passionate about, that I really care about, that really is going to help move my community forward and hopefully make a difference for years and years to come.
I love that, man. And I appreciate you taking time out to address that. And then I cut you off. If you could talk about how you would do the same in relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's funny that you mentioned relationships because we've been hearing about disentanglement word a lot lately, right?
Jada
And
Pinkett, man. Woo!
Jada, you know. And so sometimes when I think about that, it's all the absolute thinking, right? I think about cheating, all absolute, right? And I talk about the importance of being able to have certain conversations with your partner to eliminate the gray areas, right? And so in this way, you know what is cheating, what is not cheating. It's me texting somebody, it's me sending a picture, me liking a picture, it's me going on a date, whatever it may be, whatever that is, there's a conversation that y'all need to have to further define what is infidelity or not within your relationship. And know that that can change in the beginning, and it can move 6 months later to a year later, whatever case may be, depending on the level of trust, depending on what has happened, what has occurred, right? And so I have conversations with couples that, maybe one partner's in there, it's like, my partner cheated. The other person's like, no, I didn't cheat. No, I didn't. Right? Because they have different perspectives regarding a very common word. Right? And so then I have to kind of work through them or work with them to figure out, is there maybe a boundary violation that took place? Right? Can you admit that maybe you didn't all absolutely cheat, right? But maybe there was a boundary violation. Maybe you tethered that line a little bit closer than what you should, right? And that's usually where the conversation has to start, right? It's not until they're able to kind of view things from that way that, like, maybe there was something that I could have done better, I shouldn't have done, that we're able to work through some things, right? And so in those situations, being that we all have different expectations, all have different views on what cheating is, having an absolute thinking, that may not help them work through their relationship. They may not help them heal through whatever trauma or experience that they may have. And so I really try to help them recognize like, yo, there's